I buried my wife 14 days ago. I watched them lower her coffin into the ground while I stood there shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I cried myself to sleep every night after that. Then yesterday, I saw her sitting on a city bus. Alive. Looking straight through the window like nothing had happened. I chased that bus through 3 blocks of traffic before she vanished again. But the worst part wasn't seeing her alive. It was realizing someone wanted me to believe she was dead. And what happened next, no one saw coming. I buried my wife 14 days ago. I stood there in the freezing rain while they lowered her coffin into the ground, white funeral flowers soaked black beneath my shaking hands. I remember staring at the marble headstone, trying to understand how a person could exist for 40 years, and then suddenly become dirt beneath your feet. People kept touching my shoulder, saying they were sorry, saying time would heal me. They lied. Time didn't heal anything. It just made the house quieter. And yesterday, everything I thought I knew about grief shattered in less than 3 seconds. A city bus rolled past the cemetery gates while I was standing there alone. I almost didn't look up. Almost. But then I saw her. Elena. Sitting behind the rain-covered window like she had never died at all. Same dark coat. Same tired eyes. Same small scar near her eyebrow she got falling down our porch stairs 15 years ago. My heart stopped so violently I thought I was having a stroke. She looked directly at me. Not through me. At me. And for one horrifying second, her face changed. Shock. Fear. Recognition. Then the bus kept moving. I ran. I don't remember dropping the flowers. I don't remember my knees slamming against wet pavement. I just remember screaming her name while the bus disappeared into traffic. Cars honked. Someone cursed at me from a taxi window. None of it sounded real. Because there are only 2 possibilities when your dead wife looks you in the eyes from a passing bus. Either she never died, or you've finally lost your mind. So tell me something. What would you do if the person you buried 2 weeks ago suddenly looked back at you from behind a rain-covered window? That night, I sat alone in the kitchen staring at Elena's coffee mug. Still sitting exactly where she left it. Cold stains at the bottom. Lipstick fading around the rim. I hadn't moved anything since the funeral. Her coat still hung beside the front door. Her shoes still waited near the hallway rug like she might walk back inside any second. Every room in that house felt paused. Frozen. Like time itself refused to continue without her. I stopped sleeping after the funeral. Couldn't do it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames. Twisted metal. The highway guardrail crushed through black smoke. The police officer standing on my porch with rainwater dripping off his hat while he told me there had been an accident. Fatal. Instant. I remember trying to ask questions, but his mouth kept moving faster than my brain could process. They told me the fire damaged the body too badly. Closed casket recommended. Marcus handled most of the arrangements after that. He said he was helping me because I was in shock. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was. Some nights, I still replay the funeral in my head. Marcus standing beside me near the grave. His hand gripping my shoulder too tightly. His voice too calm. Too prepared. Elena's sister crying into tissues while I stared at the coffin wondering why nobody would let me see her face one last time. I asked twice. Maybe 3 times. Marcus shut it down every single time. You don't want that image in your head, David. Back then, it sounded compassionate. Now it sounds rehearsed. I walked through the house listening to Elena's old voicemails again around midnight. I must have played the same message 20 times. Hey babe, don't forget we're out of milk. Normal. Stupid. Ordinary. The kind of message nobody thinks matters until the voice is gone forever. Except her voice wasn't gone anymore. That was the problem. I opened the bathroom cabinet and froze when I saw both toothbrushes still sitting together in the same cup. Mine untouched. Hers exactly where she left it. My chest tightened so badly I had to grip the sink just to breathe. Grief does strange things to a house. It turns objects into ghosts. A jacket becomes a memory. A voicemail becomes a wound. And loneliness starts sounding louder than actual noise. Around 2 in the morning, I finally sat down on the bedroom floor beside the bed. Elena's side was untouched. I still couldn't sleep there. I stared at the ceiling while rain tapped softly against the windows and one question kept crawling deeper into my skull. Why didn't they let me see her body? That question wouldn't leave me alone anymore. Not after the bus. Not after the way Elena looked at me. And definitely not after the fear I saw on her face before that bus disappeared into the night. The next morning, I went back to the same bus stop before sunrise. I told myself I was being irrational. Desperate. Grief-stricken. But my body didn't care what my mind believed anymore. It just needed answers. The air smelled like wet concrete and gasoline. Neon lights flickered above the empty street while buses hissed past one after another, their windows glowing through the cold morning fog. I stood there for almost 3 hours watching every face behind every rain-covered window. My hands stayed buried in my coat pockets because they wouldn't stop shaking. At 8:17, my heart nearly stopped again. Bus number 42 pulled slowly toward the curb, brakes screaming softly against the pavement. I almost missed her this time. She sat near the back beside the fogged-up window, head slightly lowered, dark hair tucked beneath a gray knit cap. But it was her. God help me, it was Elena. Same posture. Same nervous habit of rubbing her thumb against the edge of her sleeve whenever she was anxious. My chest tightened so fast it hurt. She looked up. Our eyes met for less than a second. Fear exploded across her face. Not confusion. Not shock. Fear. And that terrified me more than seeing her alive. I stepped toward the bus before it fully stopped. Elena. I shouted through the rain. People on the sidewalk turned immediately. A man lowered his headphones. A woman stopped pushing her stroller. Elena jerked her face away from the window like she didn't want to be seen. Then the doors opened. I rushed inside. The smell of wet jackets and diesel fuel hit me instantly. My eyes locked onto the back row. Empty. My stomach dropped. No, 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 I pushed past passengers too fast. Someone cursed at me. A teenager laughed nervously while filming with his phone. I checked every seat. Every corner. Nothing. She was gone. Impossible. The bus hadn't stopped long enough for anyone to leave. Sir, the driver snapped sharply behind me. You need to calm down. She was right here, I said, breathing hard. My wife was sitting right there. The driver frowned. You're upsetting people. A little girl stared at me while clutching her mother's arm. An older man slowly shook his head with that painful expression people use when they think someone is mentally broken. Then I heard it. Quiet. Almost whispered. He probably lost somebody. Another voice answered softly. Or maybe he lost his mind. Heat rushed into my face. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't speak. Grief has a cruel way of turning human pain into public spectacle. 1 minute you're mourning someone you love. The next minute strangers are staring at you like you're dangerous. Or pathetic. Sir, the driver repeated more firmly, either sit down or get off the bus. I turned back toward the empty seat one last time. That was when I saw it. A scarf. Dark blue. Soft wool. Folded near the window. My hand started trembling before I even touched it. Because I bought that scarf for Elena 12 years ago on our anniversary trip to Boston. And stitched inside the collar, barely visible beneath the fabric, were her initials. E.V. I didn't go home after finding Elena's scarf on that bus. I drove straight downtown with the scarf still clenched in my hand so tightly my fingers started cramping around the fabric. Rain hammered against the windshield while every thought in my head kept crashing into the same terrifying conclusion. Elena was alive. Or somebody wanted me to believe she was. Both possibilities felt dangerous. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and wet jackets. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above rows of gray desks while exhausted officers moved through paperwork like machines running on habit instead of sleep. I stood at the front counter trying to steady my breathing. I need the accident report for my wife, I said. The woman behind the desk typed Elena's name into her computer. Her expression changed almost immediately. Not shock. Discomfort. You already received the official report, Mr. Carter. I want the full file. A pause. Then another. Finally, she disappeared into a back room and returned carrying a thick red folder. The edges were bent. Water stains marked the corners. Something about it already felt wrong before I even opened it. I sat alone beneath the harsh white lights turning pages with trembling hands. Photographs. Blackened metal twisted across the highway shoulder. Burn marks. Police timestamps. A body bag half covered by a thermal sheet. I forced myself to keep looking. Then I noticed it. One entire section of traffic camera footage was missing. Not corrupted. Removed. 3 cameras showed Elena's car entering the highway. Then suddenly nothing for 11 minutes before emergency responders arrived on scene. My pulse quickened immediately. How does 11 minutes just disappear? I whispered. Nobody answered. I kept reading. The medical examiner's signature sat near the bottom of the autopsy confirmation page. Except the handwriting looked different from every other signed document in the folder. Too sharp. Too careful. Like someone trying to imitate confidence. That's when the paranoia truly started. Not panic. Not grief. Paranoia. Because grief tells you something impossible happened. Paranoia tells you somebody made it happen. I copied the doctor's name into my phone and searched public records right there at the station. My stomach tightened again almost instantly. The medical examiner had been on leave the week Elena supposedly died. I stared at the screen for several seconds without blinking. So who signed the report? And why fake it? The questions kept multiplying faster than I could process them. Outside, the rain finally stopped. But my thoughts didn't. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking again. Not from sadness this time. From adrenaline. Fear. Something ugly and growing. Because if someone altered the accident report, then Elena's death certificate might be fake too. And if that was fake, what else had they lied about? I drove home but couldn't stay there longer than 10 minutes. Elena's scarf sat on the kitchen table beside her untouched coffee mug while I opened our banking app almost without thinking. Just instinct. Pure desperation. I searched through old transactions hoping for something normal. Something that would make me feel crazy again. Instead, I found a withdrawal made 4 days earlier. $200. Transit station ATM, less than half a mile from the bus terminal. My heartbeat stumbled. No, I refreshed the page. The transaction stayed there. Another withdrawal appeared 6 days before that. Different amount. Same area. Elena's account was still active. My breathing became shallow again as I scrolled faster through transaction history. Tiny withdrawals. Careful ones. Enough to survive without attracting attention. That wasn't random spending. That was hiding. Dead people don't withdraw cash from bus stations. Only frightened people do that. I leaned back slowly in my chair while the realization crawled deeper into my chest like ice water. Someone had buried my wife. But my wife had never actually disappeared. I called Marcus the moment I saw the bank transactions. He answered on the second ring. David? His voice sounded tired. Careful. You okay? No, I said immediately. I saw Elena. A pause. Too long. Rain tapped softly against my kitchen window while I gripped the phone harder. David, Marcus exhaled slowly. You need to stop doing this to yourself. I followed a bus. I found her scarf. Her bank account is still active. Another pause. Then came the voice people use when they think you're fragile. Dangerous. Unstable. You haven't been sleeping, he said gently. Grief can do terrible things to the mind. Something cold moved through my chest. Not because of what he said. Because of how rehearsed it sounded. She looked right at me, Marcus. You're seeing what you want to see. No, I snapped. Someone falsified the accident report. Silence again. I heard him breathing. Measured. Controlled. Then he lowered his voice even further. David, maybe it's time to talk to somebody professionally. There it was. Not concern. Redirection. Gaslighting wrapped in sympathy. I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were. But he wanted me to feel it. Wanted me questioning myself. Wanted me exhausted enough to stop digging. You've been through trauma, Marcus continued softly. Losing Elena broke something inside you. That's normal. I can call your doctor if you want. Maybe get you something to help you sleep. Sleep. Pills. Silence. Everything about the conversation suddenly felt wrong. Sometimes the cruelest part of betrayal isn't being lied to. It's being slowly manipulated into doubting your own reality. After the call ended, I sat motionless in the dark kitchen staring at Elena's scarf. My reflection trembled faintly in the black window above the sink. For the first time since the funeral, grief no longer felt passive. It felt weaponized. And somehow, Marcus was standing right in the middle of it. The next day got worse. Elena's sister, Rebecca, came by unexpectedly carrying soup I never asked for. She stood in the doorway studying my face too carefully before stepping inside. I told her about the bus, the scarf, the bank withdrawals. The pity in her eyes nearly destroyed me. David, she whispered carefully, you can't keep doing this. Doing what? Looking for my wife? She's gone. No, I said. No, somebody wants me to think she's gone. Rebecca looked down immediately. Not angry. Uncomfortable. Like she already decided I was becoming someone broken. You're starting to scare people. That sentence stayed lodged in my chest like glass. By evening, 2 old family friends stopped answering my calls. One texted me instead. Maybe you should rest for a while. Rest. Such a polite word for emotional exile. The humiliation spread quietly after that. I could feel it moving through people. The careful looks. The lowered voices. The hesitation whenever I entered a room. Nobody said the word unstable directly. They didn't have to. I saw it in their reactions. A cashier smiled at me too gently. A neighbor asked if I was holding up okay with the same expression people use near hospital beds. Even Rebecca pulled me aside before leaving and whispered something that hollowed me out completely. Don't ruin Elena's memory chasing ghosts. Ghosts. That word nearly made me laugh. Because ghosts don't withdraw cash from ATMs. Ghosts don't leave scarves behind on buses. Ghosts don't look terrified when they see their husbands standing in the rain. That night, I stopped caring whether people believed me. I only cared about finding her. I drove back to the transit station just after sunset and parked across the street near the ATM tied to Elena's account. The city glowed wet and gold beneath flickering streetlights while buses hissed through puddles carrying strangers home. I sat there for almost 2 hours watching every face that passed beneath the terminal lights. Then suddenly, movement. A dark coat. Gray knit cap. My entire body locked up. Elena stepped out of the station entrance holding her head down as she moved quickly through the crowd. Alive. Real. Breathing. My heart slammed violently against my ribs. This wasn't grief anymore. This wasn't hallucination. This was happening. I followed her from half a block away through narrow streets washed in neon reflections and rainwater. She kept checking behind her shoulder like someone terrified of being followed. Twice she almost disappeared into crowds before I caught sight of her again beneath streetlights. Then she turned toward an old apartment building beside a laundromat. My pulse exploded. She climbed the front steps quickly and reached for the door. Elena. She froze instantly. Slowly, painfully slowly, she turned around. And the expression on her face destroyed whatever was left of me. Not joy. Not relief. Fear. Pure fear. David, she whispered. Her voice cracked. Then she looked past me toward the empty street behind us like she was terrified someone else might be watching. You shouldn't be here. So tell me the truth for a second. If the person you buried suddenly stood alive in front of you, would you run into their arms? Or would you ask why they let you cry over a grave that should never have existed? Because at that moment, standing in the rain while Elena stared at me like I was the danger, I realized something far worse than death might be hiding underneath all of this. And I still had no idea who was lying to me, or why. Elena kept staring past me while rainwater dripped from the edge of her gray knit cap. Her breathing looked uneven. Nervous. Panicked. Like every second we stood outside that apartment building made something worse. I stepped toward her slowly. You're alive, I whispered. The words sounded broken coming out of my mouth. She closed her eyes for a second like the sound of my voice physically hurt her. I didn't have a choice. That answer hit me harder than if she had screamed. No apology. No explanation. Just fear. Do you understand what they did to me? I asked. My voice started shaking again. I buried you, Elena. I stood over your grave while people told me to move on. Tears filled her eyes instantly. I know. You know? I laughed once. Short. Empty. You let me mourn you. A car passed slowly behind us and Elena flinched so violently it startled me. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the side entrance of the building. Not here, she whispered urgently. Please. You can't stand out here. That sentence twisted something deep inside my chest. Not because she sounded guilty. Because she sounded hunted. The apartment was small. Dim and temporary. No family photos. No decorations. Just a couch, a folding table, and blackout curtains covering every window. The place didn't feel lived in. It felt hidden. Elena locked the door immediately after we entered. Then she checked the blinds twice before finally turning toward me. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. I kept staring at her face, trying to connect this breathing woman to the coffin lowered into wet earth 2 weeks earlier. Part of me wanted to hold her. Another part wanted to scream. You need to tell me everything, I said finally. Her eyes filled again. The accident was staged. The room tilted slightly around me. What? The crash. The funeral. The death certificate. None of it was real. Every muscle in my body tightened at once. You faked your death? I had to. No. I shook my head immediately. No, people don't disappear like this unless they're running from something. Her silence answered before her mouth did. Then quietly. I am. The fear in her voice didn't sound performative. It sounded exhausted. Ancient. Like she had been carrying it alone for months. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch and rubbed trembling hands together. 3 months ago, I found something at work I wasn't supposed to see. My pulse quickened again. Elena worked in financial compliance for a private investment group downtown. Numbers. Audits. Regulatory reports. Boring things. Safe things. At least that's what I always believed. But now? Nothing about her felt safe anymore. There were accounts moving millions through shell companies, she continued quietly. Fake charities. Offshore transfers. Money disappearing and reappearing under different names. I stared at her. Money laundering? She nodded once. And when I reported it internally, her voice cracked slightly. People started following me. A cold wave moved through my spine. Cars outside our house at night. Unknown calls. A black SUV I remembered seeing twice near Elena's office weeks before the accident. At the time, it meant nothing. Now every memory felt poisoned. I tried going to the authorities, Elena whispered. But someone inside the department leaked my statement. My stomach dropped. How high does this go? She looked at me carefully before answering. Higher than you think. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows while silence swallowed the room again. Then another thought hit me. Marcus. His face flashed through my head instantly. Calm at the funeral. Calm on the phone. Too calm. Wait, I said slowly. Where does Marcus fit into this? Elena's entire expression changed. That scared me more than anything else so far. Her shoulders stiffened. Her breathing slowed carefully like she was deciding how much truth I could survive at once. He helped me disappear. The sentence barely sounded real. What? He knew people connected to the financial network. At first I thought he was protecting me. At first? Elena looked down at the floor. I was wrong. A sharp pressure started building behind my ribs. What aren't you telling me? She swallowed hard. The people moving the money, she whispered, Marcus wasn't working against them. A long silence followed. Too long. Then finally, he was helping them. The words landed like a gunshot inside my head. Suddenly every conversation with Marcus replayed differently. The sympathy. The concern. The sleeping pills. The pressure to stop asking questions. Not comfort. Control. Not grief support. Containment. I stood up so fast the chair behind me slammed into the wall. No, I muttered. No, that doesn't make sense. But it did. That was the worst part. It made horrifying sense. And one question kept growing louder inside my head while Elena stared at the floor trying not to cry. If Marcus helped fake Elena's death, then who exactly was he protecting now? I barely slept after Elena told me the truth about Marcus. Every answer created 3 more questions. Every memory from the funeral started mutating into something darker. I sat in Elena's hidden apartment before sunrise while she silently watched the street through a crack in the blackout curtains like someone expecting death to arrive at any moment. Then my phone vibrated. Bank notification. I opened it immediately. Account access temporarily restricted. My stomach dropped. What is it? Elena asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I was already opening my banking app again. Error message. Access denied. I tried our shared savings account next. Locked. Retirement account. Locked. Even the house equity line showed pending legal review. Cold panic flooded my chest. What the hell? I drove straight to the bank the second it opened. The branch manager already knew my name before I reached the desk. That terrified me instantly. Mr. Carter, she said carefully, because your wife is legally deceased, there are complications regarding account authorization. Legally deceased? I almost laughed. She's alive. The woman's expression changed immediately. Not concern. Protocol. The kind people use when they think someone unstable might suddenly become unpredictable. I understand this has been emotionally difficult for you. No. She didn't understand anything. You don't understand, I snapped. The death certificate is fraudulent. Her smile tightened slightly. Sir, perhaps you should sit down. That word hit me harder than it should have. Sir. Not David anymore. Not husband. Not victim. Just another unstable widower making people uncomfortable in public. A security guard slowly moved closer without saying anything. Humiliation burned through my entire body. I need access to my accounts. We can't release funds while the estate review remains active. Estate review. Everything sounded mechanical now. Cold. Legal. Dehumanized. Like Elena's death had transformed me into paperwork instead of a person. Then came the worst part. There's also a recommendation here requesting psychological evaluation before further authorization. I stared at her. What? She looked uncomfortable now. Standard procedure in traumatic loss cases involving emotional instability. Emotional instability. That phrase echoed inside my skull like a slap. Somewhere behind me, I heard whispering. Two employees pretending not to stare. One older customer slowly shaking his head. That familiar look again. Pity. The kind that strips dignity away piece by piece. They didn't just bury my wife. They buried my right to be believed. I walked out of the bank shaking with rage so hard I almost couldn't breathe. The city suddenly felt different around me. Hostile. Artificial. Every smiling stranger looked fake. Every polite voice sounded rehearsed. It was like Elena's death certificate had infected reality itself. By the time I returned to the apartment, Elena already knew something was wrong. You went to the bank. It wasn't a question. I nodded once. They locked everything. Her face collapsed quietly. I'm sorry. No, I said immediately. No more apologies. I need the truth now. All of it. Elena sat down slowly at the kitchen table and covered her mouth with trembling fingers. For several seconds she couldn't even look at me. Then finally, I was there. I frowned. What? At the funeral. The room went silent. Every sound disappeared except the blood pounding inside my ears. You what? Tears rolled down her face instantly. I watched from across the cemetery. The image hit me so violently I physically stepped backward. Rain. The coffin. Me collapsing beside the grave. And somewhere in the distance, Elena watching it happen. I saw you holding the flowers, she whispered through tears. I heard you calling my name. Something inside my chest cracked open. You heard me? She nodded while crying harder now. And I still couldn't come to you. I turned away immediately because I couldn't let her see my face at that moment. Anger. Relief. Devastation. Love. Betrayal. Every emotion collided so violently I thought I might actually black out. You let me bury you. I was trying to keep you alive. By destroying me? Her silence answered everything. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The apartment suddenly felt too small for all the pain trapped inside it. Then Elena whispered something that froze my blood completely. Marcus knew where I was the entire time. I turned slowly. What? He helped arrange the funeral while hiding me here. Every muscle in my body tightened again. Why? Elena looked toward the dark apartment window with pure terror in her eyes. Because if Marcus was helping those people, she whispered carefully, then he needed to make sure I stayed exactly where he could see me. The apartment suddenly felt colder after Elena said Marcus had been watching her the entire time. I couldn't process it. Marcus had sat beside me at the funeral. Held my shoulder while I cried. Told people I was trying to stay strong. All while knowing Elena was alive. The betrayal was so massive my brain almost rejected it completely. No, I muttered, pacing across the apartment. No, if Marcus helped fake your death, why keep you hidden afterward? Why not help you disappear completely? Elena looked terrified answering that question. Because something changed. My chest tightened. What changed? She hesitated. Too long. Then finally, he sold information about me. The room went dead silent. What? I found out 2 weeks after the funeral. Her voice shook harder now. Marcus was feeding updates to the same people moving the money. I stared at her in disbelief. Why would he do that? Money. One word. Cold. Empty. Ugly. He owed people, Elena whispered. A lot of money. Gambling. Investments gone bad. They offered him protection if he cooperated. Protection. That word made me sick. So this entire time, I swallowed hard. Marcus knew they wanted to kill you? Elena's eyes filled with tears again. Yes. My pulse exploded. Not silence. Not fear. Rage. Pure rage crawling up my spine so fast I had to grip the kitchen counter to steady myself. He stood beside me while I buried you. I know. He hugged me. I know. He looked me in the eyes while you were hiding 5 miles away. Elena couldn't answer anymore. Because there was no answer big enough for that kind of betrayal. Then she said something that turned my blood cold. They were never supposed to let me live this long. I stopped breathing for a second. What? The fake death was temporary, she whispered. Marcus told me they only needed me hidden until certain accounts were moved offshore. A horrible realization started forming. And after that? Elena looked down. They were going to make the death real. Every sound inside the apartment disappeared. I could actually hear my own heartbeat. Slow. Heavy. Violent. The accident. The closed coffin. The forged signatures. None of it had been about protecting Elena. It had been containment. Control. Delay. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Marcus stopped being a frightened accomplice and became something worse. A broker. Selling Elena's fear one piece at a time. A car door slammed outside. Elena froze instantly. So did I. The color drained from her face while she backed slowly away from the window. They found me. Who? I don't know. Another car door slammed. Footsteps. My entire body locked tight with adrenaline. Elena grabbed my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. David, listen to me carefully, she whispered rapidly. If anything happens, do not trust Marcus. No matter what he says. Then came 3 slow knocks at the apartment door. Not loud. Not rushed. Controlled. That terrified me more than screaming would have. Elena's breathing turned uneven beside me while both of us stared toward the entrance in complete silence. Then a familiar voice spoke from the hallway. David? Marcus. You need to open the door. I stared at the apartment door while Marcus kept knocking softly from the hallway. Not angry. Not rushed. Patient. That scared me more than panic ever could. Elena grabbed my arm harder. Don't open it. But something inside me had already changed. For 2 weeks I had been grieving. Confused. Humiliated. Dragged through gaslighting so deep I nearly questioned my own sanity. Not anymore. Fear does strange things to a man. Push it hard enough and eventually it breaks into something else. Rage. I looked at Elena. Really looked at her. Pale face. Trembling hands. Eyes swollen from weeks of hiding like a hunted animal while the people responsible walked freely through the world pretending to care about us. No. I was done running. Marcus knocked again. David, we need to talk. The calmness in his voice felt poisonous now. I stepped closer to the door instead of backing away. Elena, I said quietly, everything you have on them. Accounts. Emails. Names. I want all of it. She stared at me in shock. What? We stop hiding. Another knock. Softer this time. Almost friendly. That made my blood boil. There are people outside, Elena whispered. You don't understand how dangerous this is. No, I said coldly. I understand it perfectly now. I finally did. This was never about grief. It was about control. Marcus needed me broken because broken people don't investigate. Broken people take sleeping pills. Sign paperwork. Accept funerals. Stay quiet. But rage changes the equation. Sometimes truth stops being a choice. Sometimes it becomes the last weapon keeping you human. I unlocked my phone and started photographing everything Elena handed me. Bank transfers. Shell corporations. Offshore account numbers. Fake charities laundering millions through investment networks tied to politicians and real estate firms. Every file made the conspiracy bigger, dirtier, more dangerous. And Marcus sat directly in the middle of it. Then Elena handed me something that stopped me cold. Power of attorney documents. Signed under her name. I frowned immediately. What is this? Her voice shook. Marcus filed emergency authorization after my death. I scanned the pages fast. My stomach twisted violently. Marcus had legal authority over Elena's remaining assets. The house. Her accounts. Insurance payouts. Everything. He forged this, I whispered. Elena nodded slowly. He said it was temporary. Just until things settled. But things were settling now. Into place. Every missing piece started connecting at once inside my head. The closed casket. The pressure to medicate me. The frozen accounts. The emotional instability flag at the bank. Marcus wasn't cleaning up after Elena's death. He was replacing us. Piece by piece. He stole our voices first. Then our rights. Then our lives. Manipulators never take your money first. They take away your ability to speak. A violent knock suddenly hit the door. Harder this time. Elena, Marcus called out calmly, they know where you are now. My pulse exploded. Elena's face drained white. He's lying, she whispered quickly. He's trying to scare us out. But I wasn't sure anymore. That was the worst part. Marcus had poisoned reality so completely I couldn't tell which fears were real and which ones he'd planted inside us. Another knock. Then silence. I moved slowly toward the peephole. Marcus stood alone in the hallway wearing the same dark coat he wore at Elena's funeral. Calm expression. Empty eyes. One hand still resting against the doorframe like he had all the time in the world. Then he looked directly toward the peephole. And smiled. Not warm. Not apologetic. Confident. Like a man who still believed he controlled the ending of this story. I opened the door for Marcus 3 minutes later. Not because I trusted him. Because I wanted him to believe I was finally breaking. The apartment smelled like stale whiskey and exhaustion by the time he walked inside. I made sure of that. One bottle sat open on the kitchen counter beside an untouched glass. My eyes burned red from 2 straight nights without sleep. Elena stayed hidden in the back room while Marcus slowly scanned the apartment like a man checking whether his trap still held its prey. And I let him think it did. You look terrible, he said softly. I laughed once. Weak. Hollow. Congratulations. Marcus watched me carefully after that. Measuring me. Testing me. I could almost see the relief forming behind his eyes. He thought the pressure was finally working. Thought grief and paranoia had reduced me into something manageable. Good. That was exactly what I needed him to believe. I sat heavily at the kitchen table and rubbed both hands over my face while Marcus stayed standing near the counter pretending to be concerned. But concern has a rhythm when it's fake. Too controlled. Too polished. Every pause rehearsed. I can't do this anymore, I muttered quietly. Marcus relaxed almost instantly. The shift was tiny. A loosened shoulder. A slower breath. Confidence creeping back into his posture. "You've been through trauma," he said gently. "Nobody would blame you for falling apart." Falling apart. That phrase almost made me smile. Because for the first time since Elena's funeral, I finally wasn't. A tiny hidden camera sat behind the coffee machine pointed directly at the kitchen table. Elena set it up 20 minutes earlier while Marcus waited outside. My phone recorded audio from inside my jacket pocket. Backup recording. Insurance. Every lie. Every reaction. Every slip. And Marcus had no idea. I lowered my head again like I was too exhausted to fight anymore. "You were right," I whispered. "Maybe I really am losing my mind." Marcus stepped closer. Slowly. Carefully. Like approaching a wounded animal. "That's not what I meant, David." But his eyes said something different. Victory. He thought he'd survived this. Thought Elena was still hidden. Cornered. Afraid. Then Marcus made a mistake. He poured himself a drink. Not nervous. Not cautious. Comfortable. That's when I knew arrogance was finally cracking him open. "You know what the worst part is?" I asked quietly. Marcus sat down across from me. "What?" I still can't stop thinking about the funeral. Something flickered across his face. Tiny. Fast. Gone. I leaned forward slightly. "You stood beside me the entire time." Marcus said nothing. "You watched me cry." Still nothing. "You let me bury an empty coffin." A long silence stretched across the kitchen. Then Marcus sighed. Not guilty. Annoyed. And suddenly his entire mask shifted. "I was trying to protect you." There it was. The first crack. Protect me from what? Marcus swirled whiskey slowly in the glass before answering. "From knowing how ugly this really was." I kept my breathing steady even though adrenaline slammed through my chest. "Ugly how?" Another pause. Then Marcus leaned back in his chair like a man finally exhausted from pretending. "Elena got involved in things she didn't understand." My pulse quickened. She was trying to expose criminals. She was trying to destroy people with power. His voice sounded colder now. Sharper. More honest. She should have walked away. But she didn't. Marcus looked directly into my eyes. "No," he said quietly. "She didn't." Silence swallowed the room again. Then he muttered something that nearly stopped my heart. "She was supposed to disappear quietly after the crash." I froze completely. Marcus took another drink. Like he barely cared anymore. "But Elena kept fighting," he continued softly. "That was always her problem." Every muscle inside me tightened. "Marcus," he looked at me with tired, emotionless eyes. And finally said the sentence that destroyed whatever humanity I still saw in him. "She should have died for real that night." Marcus's words still hung in the kitchen air when the bedroom door suddenly slammed open behind him. Elena stepped out. Marcus froze instantly. For the first time that night, real fear crossed his face. Not performance. Not manipulation. Fear. You lying son of a bitch, Elena whispered. Her voice shook violently. Marcus stood up too fast, whiskey glass crashing against the floor beside the table. Amber liquid splashed across the tiles while silence exploded between all three of us. Elena, don't say my name. She screamed it so hard the sound echoed through the apartment walls. I had never heard her sound like that before. Not grief. Not panic. Pure betrayal. You told me they would protect David if I disappeared, she shouted. You promised me nobody else would get hurt. Marcus rubbed both hands over his face like a man finally losing control of a collapsing performance. You don't understand how dangerous these people are. No, Elena snapped. You were the dangerous one. That hit him. Hard. I saw it instantly in his eyes. Marcus stopped pretending after that. The mask cracked completely. You think I had a choice, he shouted back suddenly. They owned everything. The banks, the lawyers, people inside the police department, and you sold me to them anyway. I kept you alive. For how long? Elena screamed. Until they decided to finish the job? Marcus slammed both hands against the kitchen counter so violently the hidden camera nearly shook loose behind the coffee machine. You were supposed to disappear quietly, he roared. But you kept digging. You kept pushing. The room went dead silent again. My pulse hammered so hard I could barely hear. Because there it was. The confession. Raw. Ugly. Real. Marcus looked at both of us breathing heavily now, his face pale with exhaustion and fury. Then he pointed directly at me. And him? Marcus barked bitterly. He was already broken after the funeral. 1 more month and he would have signed everything over without a fight. Every nerve in my body ignited at once. The house. The accounts. The power of attorney. The medication. The humiliation. It was all planned. Every second. Every fake moment of sympathy. Elena started crying openly now. You stood beside David while he buried me. Marcus laughed once. Cold. Empty. That funeral saved both of your lives. No, I said quietly. Marcus turned toward me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid of him anymore. That funeral saved yours. Something shifted in Marcus's face then. He realized it too late. The camera. The recording. The mistakes he'd already made. His eyes flicked toward my jacket pocket. Toward the phone. Toward the truth. Then panic finally appeared. Real panic. You recorded this? Nobody answered. Marcus backed away slowly like an animal realizing the trap had closed around its own neck. What did you do? He whispered. Elena wiped tears from her face while staring at him with absolute disgust. No, she said quietly. What did you do? Marcus looked smaller suddenly. Not powerful. Not intelligent. Just pathetic. A man who traded human lives for protection that was never going to save him anyway. And standing there watching him unravel, something inside me finally snapped loose after weeks of grief, humiliation, and psychological torture. The most terrifying people aren't the ones who hate you. They're the ones who smile while helping bury you. Marcus lunged suddenly toward the counter. Toward the camera. But I moved first. Marcus lunged toward the hidden camera, but he never reached it. The apartment door exploded open first. Federal agents. Don't move. Everything shattered into motion at once. Marcus spun around in pure panic while 3 armed agents stormed into the apartment with weapons raised. Elena stumbled backward against the kitchen wall. One agent grabbed Marcus hard and slammed him face-first onto the counter before he could react. Hands behind your back. Marcus started screaming instantly. You don't understand. I can explain this. But nobody listened anymore. That was the beautiful part. 4 weeks Marcus controlled every conversation. Every document. Every lie. He manipulated grief itself like a weapon. But now? His voice sounded small. Desperate. Human. Exactly what he turned us into. The lead agent moved quickly toward Elena. Ms. Vale, we need the drives. Everything. Elena nodded with trembling hands and reached beneath the sink cabinet. Hidden behind cleaning supplies sat 2 encrypted hard drives wrapped in plastic. Account transfers. Fake charities. Offshore records. Names. Dates. Bribes. Enough evidence to tear apart half the financial network Marcus spent months protecting. The agent took the drives carefully. You did the right thing. Marcus laughed bitterly from the floor. No, he snapped. You idiots have no idea how many people are involved in this. One of the agents tightened the cuffs harder. We'll find out. Cold silence settled over the apartment after that. Heavy. Controlled. No screaming anymore. Just the sound of radios crackling softly while agents photographed documents and copied files from Elena's laptop. Marcus kept looking at me the entire time. Not angry. Not guilty. Terrified. Because he finally understood something. He lost. Not the money. Not the operation. Control. That's what terrified him most. An agent pulled Marcus toward the hallway while he struggled weakly against the handcuffs. David, he barked suddenly. You think this ends here? You think they're just gonna let you walk away? I stared at him calmly. For the first time since Elena's funeral, my hands weren't shaking. No, I said quietly. I think you finally ran out of places to hide. Marcus stopped fighting after that. Something inside him collapsed. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just empty. Like a man realizing every exit door has quietly locked behind him. I didn't scream at him. Didn't hit him. Didn't demand revenge. That surprised even me. Because some victories don't need violence. Some revenge works best in silence. You just stand there and watch the person who buried you realize the world finally stopped believing their lies. Marcus paused once at the apartment door before agents forced him into the hallway. He turned toward Elena one last time. And for a second, I saw regret flicker across his face. Tiny. Broken. Too late. Then the hallway swallowed him. Gone. The apartment fell quiet after that. No more manipulation. No more pretending. Just rain tapping softly against the windows while Elena sat at the kitchen table trying to steady her breathing. And me? I stood there staring at the shattered whiskey glass still spread across the floor. Because 2 weeks earlier, I thought I buried my wife. What I actually buried was the version of myself willing to trust people blindly ever again. By sunrise, Marcus Carter's face was everywhere. Local news. Crime blogs. TikTok clips filmed by neighbors leaning out apartment windows. Someone uploaded shaky phone footage showing federal agents dragging Marcus through the rain in handcuffs while camera flashes exploded across the parking lot. His expensive dark coat hung twisted off one shoulder. Hair soaked. Face pale. Gone was the calm man who organized Elena's funeral with practiced sympathy. Now he looked exactly what he truly was. Cornered. The video spread fast. Too fast. I watched one clip hit nearly 2 million views before noon. Comments flooded beneath it like blood and water. That's the guy from the funeral. He told the husband to seek psychiatric help. He faked her death? Monster. Marcus kept trying to hide his face while reporters shouted questions over each other. Did you help launder money? Did you fake a federal death report? Was Elena Vale targeted? No answers came out. Just panic. Cold. Humiliating. Public. The neighbors stood outside apartment balconies filming everything with their phones while police pushed Marcus toward the black SUV. A woman across the street whispered something to her husband while staring directly at him with disgust. That part mattered more than prison ever would. Because men like Marcus survive on image. Control. Reputation. And now the entire world watched it collapse in real time. The man who organized Elena's funeral was being shoved into a police vehicle under flashing lights. I expected to feel triumphant watching it happen. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Like my nervous system finally understood the nightmare was ending. Marcus looked toward me once before entering the vehicle. Not rage. Not arrogance. Fear. Real fear. Because handcuffs are terrifying when you spent your whole life believing you were smarter than consequences. Then the SUV door slammed shut. And just like that, Marcus disappeared for real. But the biggest shock came 2 days later. Elena stepped out publicly. Alive. The press conference happened downtown inside a federal building packed with reporters and cameras. Flashbulbs exploded non-stop the second she walked into the room beside investigators. You could physically hear people gasping. Because dead women aren't supposed to return from funerals. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she sat before the microphones, but her voice stayed steady. My death was staged as part of a criminal conspiracy involving financial laundering operations, fraudulent legal documents, and coordinated intimidation. The room erupted instantly. Questions. Shouting. Chaos. Federal investigators released portions of the evidence that same afternoon. Offshore accounts. Bribed officials. Shell charities funneling millions through investment groups connected to organized financial crime. And buried inside all of it. Marcus. The coverage exploded nationwide by evening. Every station replayed the same haunting contrast side by side. Elena's funeral photo. Marcus in handcuffs. One image built on grief. The other built on truth finally catching up. For weeks, I thought I was losing my mind. Turns out, I was standing in the middle of a carefully manufactured reality designed to erase us both. But truth has a strange survival instinct. You can bury it under paperwork, under lies, under coffins, sometimes even under grief itself. And somehow, it still claws its way back into the light. 3 months later, Elena and I rented a small house near the coast where nobody knew our names. No reporters. No courtrooms. No flashing cameras. Just ocean wind and quiet mornings. The first sunrise there felt unreal after everything we survived. Soft golden light spilled through thin kitchen curtains while waves rolled slowly against the shore outside. Elena stood barefoot beside the stove making tea with both hands wrapped around the kettle like she still needed proof ordinary life existed. And honestly, so did I. The world moved slower near the ocean. Maybe that's why broken people go there. Not to forget pain. Just to finally hear themselves think again beneath all the noise grief leaves behind. I sat on the porch wrapped in an old sweater while steam curled upward from my coffee cup. The salt air smelled clean. Honest. Nothing like the hospital disinfectant smell of funerals and police stations that had lived inside my head for weeks. Elena stepped outside quietly and handed me tea. No words at first. Just silence filled with survival. The good kind. The kind we almost never reached. Far out beyond the rocks, sunlight scattered across the water in trembling silver lines while gulls drifted slowly through the morning wind. I watched Elena breathe for a long moment before realizing something strange. For the first time since the funeral, I wasn't waiting for disaster anymore. Real peace doesn't arrive when pain disappears. It arrives when pain stops deciding who you are. That truth took me almost losing my mind to understand. People think healing means returning to who you were before the damage. It doesn't. Some wounds permanently change the architecture of your soul. And maybe that isn't tragedy. Maybe surviving means learning which parts of yourself deserve to die, so the rest can finally live. A week later, I drove back to the cemetery alone. I didn't tell Elena. I needed to see it one last time. The grave still stood beneath the old maple trees exactly where I remembered. White stone. Fresh flowers somebody had left behind. Wind moving softly through wet grass. Everything looked smaller now somehow. Less powerful. I stood there with my hands buried in my coat pockets, remembering the rain from that day. The shaking in my chest. The humiliation. The loneliness. The moment I truly believed I lost the person I loved most in the world. But standing there now, I understood something I couldn't see back then. The person buried in that cemetery wasn't Elena. It was the most naive version of me. The version that believed betrayal always arrives wearing an enemy's face. The version that thought evil looked cruel immediately instead of smiling gently while helping lower coffins into the ground. I touched the cold headstone once before stepping back. And strangely, I didn't feel anger anymore. Not even toward Marcus. Because hatred keeps you emotionally chained to the people who tried destroying you. And after everything that happened? I was too tired to keep carrying chains. The ocean taught me that waves don't fight rocks forever. Eventually they just keep moving. I looked up toward the gray morning sky while wind moved through the cemetery trees and finally allowed myself to admit one painful truth. I would never become the man I was before that funeral. But maybe healing was never about returning backward. Maybe it was about becoming someone harder to manipulate. Someone quieter. Stronger. Someone who finally understood that trust should be given carefully, but love should never disappear completely just because betrayal once wore its face. Then I turned away from the grave. And this time, I didn't look back. There are people who don't kill you with knives. They kill you with lies. Slowly. Carefully. They sit beside you while you cry. They hold your shoulder at funerals. They whisper words that sound like comfort while quietly helping bury your life underneath paperwork, manipulation, and fear. And sometimes the most terrifying part of betrayal isn't the violence. It's the kindness wrapped around it. Because real betrayal rarely arrives screaming. Most of the time, it arrives smiling. And maybe that's why stories like this hurt so deeply. Not because evil exists, but because it sometimes wears the face you trusted most. So here's the question that still keeps echoing long after everything ended. If the person you loved disappeared to save both your lives, was that betrayal? Or sacrifice? Because Elena lied. She destroyed David emotionally. She let him stand beside an empty coffin, believing the woman he loved was gone forever. But at the same time, she was terrified. Hunted. Trapped inside a nightmare built by powerful people willing to erase anyone standing in their way. And maybe life is cruel like that sometimes. Maybe survival and betrayal occasionally wear the exact same face. That's what makes forgiveness so complicated. Not when strangers hurt us. When love does. And if someone has ever manipulated you, made you question your own emotions, made you feel crazy for seeing something that later turned out to be true, you are not alone. Some of the deepest emotional scars come from gaslighting. From being slowly taught not to trust your own instincts anymore. One conversation at a time. One lie at a time. Until eventually you start apologizing for reactions that were completely human from the beginning. So if you've ever lived through something like that, tell your story below. Not for attention. For connection. Because sometimes strangers understand pain better than the people who caused it. And if you enjoy stories about betrayal, fake identities, psychological manipulation, and secrets buried alongside the dead, subscribe to Family Secrets. Because the next story begins with a sentence even more disturbing than this one. 3 months after my daughter's funeral, I received a phone call from her number.